I want you to picture a scene. It is March 1988. We're in West London.
Okay.
A limousine is winding its way through traffic, and it's heading toward Wembley Arena.
Right. I mean, in the world of rock and roll, that's basically the mountaintop.
It's the moment. The passengers inside this car are about to open for AC/DC.
Oh.
Sold-out crowd. They are, arguably at the absolute peak of their career.
It's what most bands dream of their entire lives. You'd expect champagne corks popping, maybe some, nervous energy, high fives all around.
Right. But inside this specific limo, the vibe is a little different. The guitarist, George Lynch, has the lead singer, Dokken, in a legitimate headlock.
And is punching him in the face.
Yes, punching him.
It's just absolute chaos. And this isn't some playful scuffle. It's a real brawl. Security literally has to pull them apart before they even get into the venue.
They have to wipe the blood off Don's face just so we can go on stage and sing.
And the craziest part, they walk out on stage 5 minutes later and play a killer set.
That is the ultimate paradox of 80s metal, isn't it?
It really is. It just begs the question, how could a band sell millions of albums, tour stadiums, and produce this incredibly tight, melodic hard rock while absolutely despising each other's guts?
That is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're not just looking at a band, we are looking at a psychological experiment gone terribly wrong. We're doing a deep dive into the rise, the fall, and the wreckage of Dokken. And we're talking about one of the most legendary and volatile feuds in rock history, Don Dokken versus George Lynch.
And look, we have a massive stack of sources for this one. We're pulling from deep-cut interviews with Eddie Trunk, features in Rock Candy Magazine, Ultimate Classic Rock, Loudwire.
And some very recent, very candid comments from the band members themselves that paint a pretty bleak picture of what was happening behind the curtain.
A lot to get through.
Our mission today is to figure out the mechanics of this feud. Was the hate actually the secret ingredient? And, with all the reunion rumors flying around lately, Oasis, Linkin Park, everyone seems to be making up. We have to ask, has the ship for the original Dokken lineup finally sailed?
It's such a fascinating case study because usually we're told that band chemistry means getting along, like the Beatles laughing in the studio.
Right.
But in Dokken, chemistry meant combustion.
So let's go back to the start, because they weren't born enemies, surely. How did this odd couple dynamic actually begin?
Well, they came from different universes, basically. Both had rough starts, but they processed that trauma in completely opposite ways.
Okay.
You have Don Dokken, who had a really unstable childhood. He was bouncing around foster homes, very little stability.
Yeah.
Psychologically, that usually creates a need for control.
A need to control your environment because you never could as a kid.
Exactly. That explains a lot about his later reputation as, a control freak. He's trying to steer the ship.
And then you have George Lynch.
Totally different story. As a teenager, he was practically living this kind of hobo lifestyle. He was hopping freight trains, dealing with drug use very early on. He was chaos. He was an improviser.
So you have the control freak and the agent of chaos meeting in the late 70s LA scene. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster right there.
Or a recipe for brilliance, depending on how you look at it. The personality clash was instant. Don was the alpha. The sources describe him as very driven, very business-minded.
And crucially, he was the soberish one.
Soberish is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence for the 1980s Sunset Strip scene.
Laughs. It's a very relative term.
It is. But he wasn't part of the core party crew. That clique was George Lynch, the drummer Wild Mick Brown, and bassist Jeff Pilson. They were living that whole lifestyle. Don just isolated himself.
So he saw George as this miserable, tortured genius.
And George saw Don as this total egomaniac who just wanted to be the boss.
It creates a divide right down the middle of a band. It's the singer versus the musicians.
And that's such a dangerous dynamic. But here's the friction point. When you put those two opposing forces together, magic happened.
Let's talk about the sound. Because Dokken, they didn't really sound like Mötley Crüe, and they didn't sound like Metallica. They had a very specific lane.
They did. They occupy this weird, perfect middle ground. You have Don's vocals, very melodic, almost pop rock. Very polished, very clean.
And then you have George's guitar playing.
Which was just aggressive, heavy, technical, fiery.
It's like mixing sugar and jagged glass.
That's a great way to put it. That tension created the signature Dokken sound. You can hear it on Tooth and Nail or Under Lock and Key. The guitar is constantly fighting the vocal.
It's trying to strangle the melody, and the melody is trying to smooth out the guitar.
And it works. I mean, they were hitting platinum status. They had Dream Warriors in the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 movie. On paper, they were on top of the world.
But behind the scenes, it wasn't just personality clashes, it was business. And, nothing ruins a friendship faster than arguing over who wrote the song.
Oh, the songwriting wars. This is where the sources get really messy because the accounts are just totally contradictory.
A total he said, she said situation.
But with millions of dollars in royalties at stake.
So let's look at the claims. What is Don's version of history?
Well, even recently, and I'm talking about a 2025 interview on a rock cruise, Don claimed he wrote almost everything, specifically on the album Under Lock and Key. He says, I wrote the songs, I wrote the melodies, I did the work.
But if you look at the liner notes on the album, the credits are all shared.
Right, and that's what Don calls his deal with the devil. He claims he voluntarily gave up 75% of the songwriting royalties to Lynch, Pilson, and Brown just to stop the arguing.
So he paints himself as the martyr for the band's harmony. Basically, I paid them to shut up and play.
That's his story.
That is a bold claim. Giving up publishing rights is like giving up your pension. Why would you do that unless you felt you had absolutely no choice?
He says it was to keep the band together, but obviously George Lynch has a slightly different recollection.
I can only imagine.
Just slightly. Lynch has gone on record calling Don a pathological liar about this. He claims that he and bassist Jeff Pilson wrote 90% of the material musically.
Okay, but what about the lyrics? Because that's usually the singer's domain. If the band writes the riff, the singer usually writes the words.
This is my favorite detail in the entire research stack. It is so absurd it has to be true.
Okay.
Lynch admits that he and Pilson were great at the music, but they were lazy with lyrics and titles. They didn't want to spend hours agonizing over poetry.
So what was their method? Did they hire a ghostwriter or something?
No, they used the TV guide.
Wait, the magazine? The little digest magazine you bought at the grocery store?
The actual physical TV guide. Lynch says they would literally sit on the couch in the studio, flip through it, and just lift cool-sounding titles from the TV movies of the week.
No way. You are telling me platinum-selling hits were named after Tuesday night melodramas?
According to George Lynch, yes. Titles like Tooth and Nail, When Heaven Comes Down, and even Don't Close Your Eyes, he claims those were just plucked right out of the TV listings.
That is hilarious. It really undermines the whole tortured artist mystique, doesn't it?
It really does.
You imagine them sweating over Parchment by candlelight, but really they're just seeing what's on CBS at 8 p.m.
Hey, Knight Rider is on. Let's write a song about a talking car. But look, regardless of who actually held the pen or the magazine, the credits were eventually split 4 ways.
And instead of solving the problem,
It just created this lingering resentment. Don felt he was being generous. The band felt they were earning their keep. It was just a ticking time bomb.
and that bomb finally goes off in 1988, the Monsters of Rock tour. This is legendary in rock history, not just for Dokken, but for the whole shift in culture.
You have to understand the context of this tour. This wasn't just a concert run. It was a changing of the guard. You have Van Halen headlining the kings of party rock. The Scorpions are there.
And then at the bottom of the bill, but rising fast, is this band called Metallica.
And this isn't the Black Album radio-friendly Metallica yet. This is
Oh!
And Justice for All era Metallica. They're angry, they are fast, and they are not playing nice.
Not at all.
In fact, Don Dokken has admitted that Metallica is maybe the reason we broke up. Because Metallica was playing with this do-or-die intensity. They were hungry, aggressive, they didn't have hairspray, they had sweat and rage.
And Dokken has to follow them on stage.
Well, initially no, but Don said that just being compared to Metallica made Dokken look like the Partridge Family or the Monkees.
Ouch. That is a brutal cell phone. He knew they looked soft compared to what was coming.
It's honest, though. He actually went to management and asked if Metallica could play after them. He was willing to give up the better slot because they were getting blown off the stage every single night.
But management said no.
Nope. Contracts are contracts.
So they're out there playing their melodic hard rock while the audience is still buzzing from Master of Puppets. And then the reviews start coming in. There was that one in the New York Times that just gutted them.
Oh, this is the nail in the coffin. The Times reviews the concert. They praise Van Halen. They love Metallica's energy. And then for Dokken, the reviewer writes something that would just destroy anyone's ego.
What did he write?
He wrote, "During Dokken's set, a record number of hot dogs were sold."
Wow. That is devastating. He didn't even say they were bad. He said they were a bathroom break.
A record number of hot dogs.
Yeah.
It implies the entire stadium just turned their backs to go get a snack. It destroyed Don's morale.
He was already feeling isolated. He felt the band's drug use was making them sloppy.
And now the press is openly mocking them.
So the tour ends. The morale is at zero, and Don gives the ultimatum.
It's the classic, it's him or me. He told the rhythm section, Pilson and Brown, I can't work with Lynch anymore. If he stays, I go.
And they chose Lynch.
They did. They sided with the guitarist
Yeah.
and the money they left on the table. That is the part that blows my mind.
How much are we talking? Because they were huge at this point.
They had a deal on the table for 2 more albums.
Yeah.
$10 million.
$10 million. In 1988 money, that's like, what, 30 million today?
Easily. It's generational wealth. And Don walked away from it. He said he did it to save his sanity.
That tells you how toxic it was.
He would rather be broke than spend another hour in a room with George Lynch.
Unbelievable. So they break up, the 80s end, grunge comes in and wipes everybody out. But, you know, in rock and roll, no breakup is forever. They tried to patch it up in the 90s.
They did. They reunited in 1994 for an album appropriately titled Dysfunctional.
Truth in advertising. At least they were self-aware.
Very much so. And look, it sold okay, about 400,000 copies. But the hatred hadn't gone anywhere. There's a story from a sound check in Japan during this reunion that sums it all up perfectly.
What happened?
So Don asked George, what is the problem? Why are you so mad? We're making money again. We're in Japan. People love us.
And what did George say?
He just points up at the giant backdrop behind the stage.
The banner that just says Dokken.
Right. And George said, that's the problem. He hated that the singer had the name recognition. He felt it was his band too, but Don got the glory because his last name was on the marquee.
It's pure ego. You can't fix that with a paycheck. It didn't matter if they split the money. The name itself was the issue.
Exactly. They made one more album in 1997 called Shadow Life, which Don now calls a piece of crap.
And the reunion ended how?
Surprise, surprise. With another physical fight. George threw a punch and then he was fired via fax.
A fax. You're fired. One sentence. That is so cold. That is peak 90s business cruelty.
And that was the end of the classic era, for real this time.
Which brings us to today. We are in a world where Oasis is talking. Everyone seems to be reuniting for another tour. The question on every fan's mind is, will the original Dokken lineup ever get back together for real?
If you look at the facts, not the rumors, but the actual facts,
Yeah.
it seems incredibly unlikely.
Why? Is it just the bad blood? Or is there more to it?
It's practical now, too. We have to talk about Mick Brown, the drummer. He is retired, and it's really sad. He has severe arthritis and back pain from decades of playing that hard.
Oh, wow.
He literally sold his drum kit. He said, I'm not a drummer anymore.
That's heartbreaking. He was such a powerhouse behind that kit.
It is. And he was very vocal before he retired that any reunions were just money grabs. He didn't want to do it.
Okay, so the drummer is out. What about the others?
Then you have Jeff Pilson, the bassist. He's been in the band Foreigner for over 14 years now. He's busy. He's working constantly. He has a steady gig where nobody is punching each other.
And George? Where is the tortured genius now?
George has about 9 different bands he juggles. He's constantly creating. But he gave a quote recently that really sums it all up. He said, I think that ship has sort of already left the harbor.
Left the harbor. That sounds pretty definitive.
He's asking the honest question, would a reunion be a great bookend to their legacy? Or would it just be a sad attempt to recapture something that's gone?
A nostalgia act.
Right. He lists their classic albums, Tooth and Nail, Back for the Attack, and asks, can we live up to that? Or will we just look like old men trying to be young again?
It's a question. Sometimes it's better to leave the memory alone, but there is a twist here, isn't there? Because George and Don are actually sharing a stage again.
This is the ultimate irony of it all. George Lynch's band, Lynch Mob, has been opening for Don Dokken's current version of Dokken.
Wait, so they tour together but not as Dokken together.
Exactly. It's a very modern, very weird arrangement. George opens a show with his own band. Then Don plays his set with his hired guns.
And then what?
And then, for the encore, George comes out, they play Kiss of Death or Tooth and Nail together, and Don says they get along great now. He calls it a beautiful moment.
That's actually really nice. It's like the pressure's off, they don't have to be married anymore, they can just be divorced friends who play a song together once a night.
I think that's it. Don has been through a lot. He beat cancer recently. He's spoken about how that changed his perception. He said, why be miserable? He's content. He doesn't need the stress of a full creative reunion where they have to write songs and argue over credits.
So, no more TV guide songwriting sessions in the future.
Probably not. And honestly, maybe that's for the best.
It really is a fascinating story of how fragile success can be. You have all the ingredients, the look, the songs, the talent, but the human element just couldn't hold it together.
Dokken is the ultimate example of lightning in a bottle. We use that phrase a lot, but think about it. That volatile chemistry created magic, but by definition, lightning in a bottle eventually explodes. You can't keep it contained forever.
The container shatters, and maybe that's the real takeaway here. The friction wasn't a bug, it was a feature.
Completely. If they had gotten along, if they were best friends who braided each other's hair,
And politely shared the royalties and hugged it out after every show.
the music probably would have been boring. You needed the aggression of George's guitar trying to strangle the melody of Don's vocals. That was the band.
It raises a pretty provocative question for us to leave you with. We always say we want our favorite bands to get along and reunite. But does true rock and roll brilliance maybe require a backstage fist fight now and then?
Yeah, I mean, if they had used that TV guide together and high-fived, would we even be talking about them 40 years later?
I really doubt it.
Sometimes, hate is a hell of a motivator.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the chaotic world of Dokken.
See you next time.